Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. My name is Sonakshi Sinha and I work as a manager in the data privacy and legal team at Riskpro India. Today we all know that India has got its own data privacy regulation named as Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. Now the very basic question that comes to our mind is the act applicable to us as an organization? Are we coming under the ambit of the act? What are the requirements mentioned under the Act which we have to abide by? Before we can move to those questions, let us understand what the Act is all about. This Act is basically focusing on the processing of the digital personal data, giving rights to the individual who is giving their data to the organizations, and also this act is putting an obligation on the organization who is collecting the data. So if you look at the act is divided into three parts. First, it only focuses on the processing of the digital personal data. Secondly, it gives rights to the individual whose data we are collecting as an organization, and it is also putting some obligation on the organization who is processing the data. Before we move to the broader view of if it is applicable to us or not, let us understand the basic definitions. The very first definition that I would like to talk is about the personal data. Now, what is personal data? Personal data is basically any identifier that can help us to identify an individual. So it can be any information that can help us to identify an individual. So if you look at the definition of personal data is very wide term. It can include any kind of identifiers which can help us to identify an individual. So for organization, not only the name, phone number, email ID is the personal data, but it can be any random other identifiers, other information that they collect that can help us to identify an individual. Second term that I want to discuss is digital personal data. Now, digital personal data is basically the personal data when you are collecting it in a digitized form or you are storing it in a digitized form. So anything that you put it in a digital format will become your digitized personal data. The third term, which is a very important term, is your processing. Now, what is processing? Processing is basically a set of operations that we perform as an organization on the personal data. So processing is basically whatever we do with the data. So any action that we do with the data, using the data, will become the processing. So start from the collection of data till the end destruction of data will be counted as processing. So processing can be using of that data, processing can be storing of that data, processing can be alteration to that data, processing can be anything that you do with using that data set to perform the services. Now, once we have understood all these important terms, let us move to the parties that are there in the act. Now, if we talk about the parties, there are three parties. One is your data fiduciary. Data fiduciary is basically an organization who decides what to do with the data, who decides the means of processing the personal data. So data fiduciary becomes your controller of that particular data set that the individual provides. Second party that we need to discuss is your data principals. Data principals are the individual who provides the data to the organizations to process the data for availing some of their services. The last party in the act is the significant data fiduciary. Now, significant data fiduciary has not been very well defined in the act. It will be defined by some notifications by the central government, and we shall wait to understand what a significant data fiduciary is. So it will be a class of data fiduciary only, but might be that there are few obligations that are additional to the significant data fiduciary. Now we have understood what are the important terms, we have understood what parties do we have in the act. Let us try to answer the question that is it applicable to us? Now, yes, as an organization, it is very well applicable to all of us as an organization. Why am I saying that? Because it states that the Act is applicable to processing of the digital personal data and collection of the digital personal data through a digitized form. Or if we have collected the data in a non-digitized format but subsequently have digitized it, the Act would be applicable to that particular data set also. So today every organization is somewhere or the other collecting the data in a digitized format, in a digital form. Also, if not collecting the data in a digital form, they prefer to secure the data in a digital format and keep it over the shared drives and saved drives. Now, looking at what the Act says, every organization here in India will have to comply to it, because each one of us is somewhere or the other processing personal data, maybe not from the client front but on the employee front we might be processing some kind of personal data, and this Act would be applicable to us very well. Now, it also states that it is applicable to an organization outside the Indian territory, but the only condition here is that the organization which is situated outside the Indian territory should provide their products and services within the Indian territory. So very well, if there are any organizations which are providing the product and services to individuals within the Indian territory, then that organization will also have to comply to the DPTP Act. Now, when this Act would not be applicable, in what situations the Act would not be applicable? The very first thing where the Act would not be applicable is to processing of any personal data for a personal use or any household use. So anything that you do with the data outside the capacity of the organizational use will become your personal use or the household use, and there the Act would not be applicable. The second exception is that when the data has been made public by the data principal itself, then in that case your Act would not be applicable, or the data has gone public in the public domain because due to some state requirements, then in that case your data would not be coming under the ambit of the Act. I hope it was a really helpful session for you, and we will also try to cover these small topics and bring more videos like these to make you understand the concept that are there in the Act. Thank you so much for watching this video.